I was born in one of those times when it's every man for himself, where justice is a bullet fired from a revolver. My father was a farmer, my mother a seamstress, but I guess I was destined for a different path. When I was a boy, Jed Morgan's gang swept through our neighborhood, a bastard whose greed and lust for power knew no bounds. They took everything: food, livestock, and then my father's life when he tried to protect us. That was the day I swore I would find Jed and make him answer for everything. It's been many years. I became a bounty hunter. The work was dirty, but honest. Every day I faced new dangers, always risking my life to catch fugitives. But behind it all, my main target was Jed Morgan. His name was whispered by the desert winds. Rumors of his deeds spread across the Wild West like ashes from a campfire. But he was cunning and slippery, leaving nothing but fear and chaos in his wake. At that time, the Wild West was a place where wealth and crime walked hand in hand. Railroad tycoons built their empires, and banks became the new temples where people worshipped gold. But it was that gold that attracted men like Jed, who robbed and killed for profit. As cities grew, businessmen grew rich. Ordinary people built their dreams, and people like me became their last hope. One day, I received news that changed everything. In a remote town known for its railroad junction, Jed Morgan had committed a bloodbath. He and his men looted a bank, killing nearly a dozen people in the process. Local authorities put a bounty of $5,000 on his head. This was my chance. I was ready. I was nearby. I knew this little town was just another victim on his long list. I had to hurry. I rode out on my trusty steed, realizing there was more than just a chase ahead of me. It was a chance to finish what had begun in my childhood. Jed wasn't just a criminal. He was a symbol of all the evil that plagued our world. And I swore that he would be finished. Swore that whatever it took to rid the world of the bastard Jed Morgan and his minions. My pursuit began in the desert. The endless sands and the hot sun were the first obstacles on my way to Jed. Along the way, I met an old trapper named Henry, who told me of a recent ambush on a caravan near Raven Creek Gorge. Jed's gang had left a trail of blood behind them, so I decided to check the place out. When I reached the ravine, the air smelled of gunpowder and death. Among the remains of the caravan, I found one survivor, a girl named Abby. She was young, but her eyes spoke of the horrors she had endured. Jed had taken her brother, and she begged me to help. I couldn't refuse. Abby knew the area and helped me catch up with the gang. Now I had not only my duty, but her hope. Our path brought us to a ghost town where bandits had ambushed us. They were heavily armed, and a fierce firefight ensued. Bullets whistled, dust rose, and I covered Abby, who had managed to take cover behind an old building. That day I realized that every time I pulled the trigger, I was getting closer to my target. SOI made it through quickly, leaving them no chance. When the gunfire died down, I found one of Jed's closest aides among the bodies. In his pocket was a map leading to the gang's secret camp in the mountains. Now, I knew where to find the main enemy, but the way there was dangerous, and I knew there were many more trials to come. As I began to approach the mountains, where the map said Jed's camp was, I found myself thinking more and more about the past. These were the places where I had once hunted with my father. Every turn of the trail reminded me of the days when life seemed simpler, but those memories were a fleeting comfort. Abby followed me relentlessly. She began to ask questions why I had chosen this path, what was driving me. I answered evasively, but deep down, those questions plagued me too. I knew my life was a path of revenge, but what would be left when the goal was accomplished? In my conversations with Abby, I began to see my reflection, my fears and doubts. Jed's camp was not what I expected. It was a fortified village in the mountains, where his men lived like kings. They pillaged the neighboring settlements, keeping the whole area in fear. I realized that storming this camp alone would be suicide. Instead, I decided to use stealth. Abby and I acted out a scene. She pretended to be a fugitive that I had rescued. We entered the camp, disguised as traitors. I knew I'd be discovered sooner or later, but I had a plan. Along the way, I discovered an important detail. Jed was holding the locals captive, forcing them to work for him. This was a chance to not only catch Jed, but to save these people. At night, when the guards relaxed, we sprang into action. I set fire to several buildings to create chaos. Abby took advantage of the commotion and handed weapons to the prisoners, who rushed to the attack. A firefight broke out throughout the camp. I moved from cover to cover, taking precise aim at the gang leaders. Every shot was quick, and every movement was deliberate. At one point, I had to get into hand-to-hand combat with one of Jed's goons. He was huge and strong, but his size was his weakness. I used the dagger I always kept with me to finish the fight. Abby, meanwhile, was as good a shot as any. She had my back, shooting away from the pursuers. When most of the bandits had been defeated, I finally made it to the center tent. Jed was there. We fought furiously, exchanging blows with everything from revolvers to fists. He was stronger than I thought, and nearly took my life, but I was able to outsmart him by hitting him on his weak spot, an old scar on his side that I knew from stories. Then I jumped on top of him and slit his throat, telling the bastard it was for my father. I watched with joy as he was tortured and soon died after losing a lot of blood. When Jed fell, the remaining bandits dropped their weapons and surrendered. The camp was liberated. At that moment, I realized that I had not only survived, but had destroyed a source of fear for a lot of people. It was not only my victory, but also Abby's, the prisoners, and everyone who suffered under Jed's tyranny. As the people of the surrounding villages began to gather around to see the defeated Jed, I stood in the shadows, hiding my emotions. I knew that to them, I wasn't just a bounty hunter anymore. I was a hero, even if I wasn't ready to accept it myself. The morning after the victory was unsettling. The inhabitants we had liberated gathered around to thank us. Their faces were haggard, but a new hope shone in their eyes. Abby had become a heroine to them, though she still tried to deny her involvement. And I stayed in the shadows, as I always did. The local authorities sent a delegation from the nearest town. One of them, Judge Walsh, thanked me personally, handing over the bounty on Jed's head. $5,000, a sum that would change my life. But I knew that money couldn't bring me back my peace. While the others celebrated, I went to the cemetery where Jed's victims were laid to rest. I stood there alone, thinking my revenge was over, but the inner conflict was just beginning. What now? Go back to bounty hunting or find a new path? Abby came up to me and asked me what was going to happen next. Her voice was quiet, but she sounded concerned. I looked at her and realized that maybe I had a chance to start over. But what would that mean for me? For someone who had lived a life of revenge for so long? Everything I knew had shattered with the fall of Jed Morgan. I stood at the crossroads of my life, like a man who had lost the meaning of his existence. Go back to bounty hunting. It would have been easy, but deep down, I knew that path led only to emptiness. Abby suggested that I travel together. She believed we could help other cities suffering from robbery and injustice. Her words got me thinking. It was a chance to use my skills for something more than revenge. After all, Morgan wasn't the last piece of shit in our world. We left the mountain camp behind. The reward helped us start a new phase. I gave up the past, though it was still with me in the form of scars on my body and soul. Every day I remembered those I had lost, and tried to convince myself that I had done everything I could to make sure their deaths had not been in vain. Our journey became a symbol of rebirth. We helped rebuild a world destroyed by the likes of Jed Morgan. We became a couple united, not only by a common goal, but by mutual respect. Abby grew into a strong and determined woman who reminded me that even in this cruel world, there is a place for kindness. Years passed, and rumors of a noble bounty hunter and his partner spread across the Wild West. People told stories of a couple who fought for justice where no one expected it. I knew those stories were only part of the truth, but maybe that was enough. And in those rare moments when I was alone at sunset, I still wondered, who had I become? A hero, a savior, or just a man trying to make amends? I didn't have an answer, but I knew one thing. In that moment, I was free.